as well. We are outside the presence of the jury. Are the parties ready for the jury?
We are, Your Honor. I think Mr. Brockler might have an answer on the question that we left with when we went on break.
Okay, Mr. Brockler.
So, Your Honor, my understanding is that Dr. Gray had not been endorsed by an expert, but I think Mr. King wanted to call him as an expert, and there was some issue about whether to do that or not. Here's what I'd respectfully request of the court is, I understand that he will no longer just be called for his interactions or observations, that there was testing and opinions and stuff. What I'm going to ask of the court is for leave as required under Court Order 65, C65, and C65A under that circumstance to be permitted to get into the actual raw data, if necessary, with him from the MMPI-2 and PAI, both ones that were administered. I know that the order that the court has says, hey, you need to do that in advance of the hearing. And so if we're going to change over to allowing him to testify as an expert in his opinions based upon those and the application of those, I'd just ask the court to permit me to, if needed, and I don't know that it'll be needed, to get into the raw data as the court had required in that order.
Mr. King?
Judge, I believe that the subject of that motion and order was the ethical prescription on sharing data among among lay people for psychologists. So I don't have a legal objection to that, as long as we're provided with some notice about what that possibly might be. But it makes sense to me, if the doctor's going to be testifying about the testing that he administered, that counsel can ask questions about the instruments that were administered. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. I think, and I don't have the orders that were mentioned in front of me, but I think my orders were attempting to protect the copyrighted materials that may have been used as part of the testing. And I think that was primarily at the request of the Colorado Mental Health Institute of Pueblo. So
I think that's right, Your Honor, and that's what I'm remembering too. So I don't know what their position is going to be on that, but in terms of the relevance of the testing instruments, I don't disagree that that's relevant.
Mr. Brockler, I think what I would ask of you is to perhaps inquire with the Colorado Mental Health Institute folks, and specifically the AG's office, to see whether this is something that they believe would be in violation of that order, and if so, whether there is a method that would allow you to do that and would allow, frankly, the other side to do that without violating any copyrights that may exist.
So, Judge, as I'm standing here, you may have seen Ms. Teach McGuire come up and whisper in my ear, and that was that she just received an email from Ms. Wheeler from the AG's office saying, please don't get into any of the other raw data from these testing materials. My recollection of the court's order had been like Mr. King's, but we printed it out, and I know the court will go back and look, but paragraph 5 on page 2 says, no part of the confidential disclosure may be presented or referenced in open court for any purpose or in any filing for any purpose. And then it goes on to say you got to seek leave of court in advance of the hearing to do that. So I'd be doing that. I know the AG's office does not want us to talk about these things, but there are 567 questions in the MMPI-2 and an additional 100, 200 or something in the PAI. Those things may become relevant depending upon the testimony of Dr. Gray, and I'd like to be able to explore those with him.
Then why don't you do this? Speak to Ms. Wheeler, if you will. Tell her about your intent, and unless you can come up with some kind of agreement as to how you can proceed and how the defense can proceed, and everybody can be in on that agreement, then have her come in at some point this week so we can address it, and she can state her objection, and you can state your position, and the defense can state its position, and then we can go from there.
Yes, sir.
So that's how we'll handle it, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. All right, pending resolution of that particular issue, though, it sounds like there's no objection to the defense calling Dr. Gray as an expert witness, notwithstanding the failure to include him in the notice of expert witnesses.
Yeah, I think it was another mistake, but I think it's one that we can get past if we just have the ability to examine them.
Okay, all right, and this is similar to what happened with the 24-hour fitness records and the person, and I said at that time I thought that it was an inadvertent failure on the prosecution and there was no prejudice to the other side, and so I allowed that. It's the same type of thing. I have no doubt when Mr. King says to me, Judge, this was not intentional, this was not in bad faith, we thought that we had endorsed Dr. Gray as an expert witness, I have no doubt that that is exactly what happened, and I take Mr. King at his word. And so, especially in a case of this magnitude, that is likely to happen at some point, and there's no objection to it, so I will allow it. And the only question is whether Mr. Brockler can get into the data related to the tests that were administered by Dr. Gray and Dr. Manguso. And Mr. Brockler will follow up with Ms. Wheeler, and then we'll go from there. And if there's not an agreement between the parties and Ms. Wheeler, who represents Colorado Mental Health Institute at Pueblo, then we'll have a brief hearing and I'll decide how we proceed, okay? All right. Okay, let's bring the jury in, please. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury's back in the courtroom. I understand that we're having some plumbing issues with one of the restrooms in one of the jury rooms, and I apologize for that. We thought we had addressed the issues last week, but they're happening again. Remember what I said about this being an old building? There you go. All right, call your next witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Deputy Hubble. Sorry.
Good afternoon. Afternoon. You solemnly swear or affirm on the penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I do. All right, please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names.
My name is Deputy Philip Allen Hublitz, PHILIP-ALAN-HUBBELL.
You may proceed, Ms. Higgs.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for being patient with us. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Could you tell the jury, please, what you do for a living?
I've worked as a deputy sheriff in the Arapahoe County Jail.
How long have you worked there?
I've been there since January of 2009, so 6.5 years.
Okay. Where are you usually assigned over at the Arapahoe County Jail?
It bounces around. I've been mostly in booking, spend a lot of time in inpatient as well.
You spend a lot of time where?
In inpatient, our medical unit.
Okay. What hours do you generally work?
Well, that depends on the year. Right now I work 05 to 1700.
Okay.
Previous years I've worked 5/8, 7 to 3, or 10 to 6, and prior to that I worked graveyards, which is 1930 to 0530.
You just rattled off a bunch of numbers. Let's see if we can get to the part that's most useful to this jury.
Okay.
Were you working at the Arapahoe County Jail back in November of 2012?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And what shift were you assigned then?
I was working the graveyard shift, which is 7:30 p.m. to 05:30 a.m.
Okay. Where were you assigned at that time?
I was assigned mostly in the medical unit.
Now, was Mr. Holmes housed in the medical unit at that time?
Yes, he was.
And this person here in the blue shirt is Mr. Holmes, correct?
That is Mr. Holmes, yes.
I want to talk to you specifically, and hopefully not for too long,
Okay.
about November 11th of 2012. At about 3:30 in the morning, did something out of the ordinary occur with regard to Mr. Holmes?
Yes, it did. I was sitting in the control room, heard a loud bang, and the individual who was watching our closed-circuit television camera said that Holmes was on his back in his cell, called for the air, had extra deputies come down, and we entered the cell and talked to him at that point.
When you say you're sitting in the control room, I just want to lay a little bit of foundation for that.
Okay.
Without getting too specific.
Right.
Mr. Holmes was he in a cell by himself?
Yes.
Okay. Was that cell monitored through video?
Yes.
And as part of your duties, you sit in sort of a separate room that can monitor the whole medical unit?
Yes.
And is it part of your duties then to also monitor the video feed from, well, I imagine all the cells?
Right. There's on graveyards, there's one person that monitors the video feeds, and there's a second person who actually does physical checks within 30 minutes.
Okay. So somebody is, if somebody has to go out of the control room to do a physical check, there's somebody waiting in the control room to monitor the video feed?
Yes.
Okay. So you hear a loud bang. You're told that he's on his back in his cell.
Yes.
Did you check on the video to see what had occurred?
I didn't have time at that moment to check to see what had occurred because he was laying there and we were worried about his welfare. So going back to check the camera and the video feed at that time was implausible. So.
Did you at some point later go back and check the video to see what had occurred?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you determine was sort of the cause of the loud bang that you had heard?
We saw him stand up on his bed, and he was facing the wall with his feet on the bed, and then he fell backwards away from the bed to the open floor area. At some point during his fall in midair, he actually kind of rolled up almost into a fetal position, almost trying to protect himself, it appeared.
Okay. Now, when the jury has seen a video of this, and on that video, there's some deputies that come into the cell to talk to him. Are you one of those deputies?
Yes, I am.
Who was the other deputy?
There was Deputy Zimmerman.
Okay. Now, you said earlier you were concerned for Mr. Holmes when you had heard that loud bang, so you didn't have time to look at the video feed. When you went in to speak with him, were you trying to determine what you had to do as a result of this incident?
Absolutely.
Okay. So kind of what you needed to do with Mr. Holmes, what was next, is that right?
Correct. We wanted to determine what happened, whether it was an accident, whether it was an intentional act, whether there were any injuries that he was complaining of.
And all of those things would inform you on what your responsibility was with regard to Mr. Holmes and his safety within your jail. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So when you went into the cell, about how long was it before you actually got into the cell?
I would say within seconds. I called for the air. I had to wait for responding deputies from booking. They were probably there within 30 seconds. That's a guess. Generally takes about that long to get through those doors.
Is that standard protocol to bring in another deputy when you need to go talk to Mr. Holmes?
Yes. Especially on graveyards, it's standard for any door to be opened to have two deputies.
So they get there and you enter the cell right away, is that right?
We open the door and we kind of cross the threshold carefully and speak to him. I started asking him questions about what happened.
Where was he when you entered his room?
He was still on his back on the floor. His feet were facing his bunk, and his head was, I'm not sure if it was resting on the wall, but it was near the wall, furthest away from his bunk.
Excuse me, did he look up at you or respond to you when you first entered?
He didn't look up at me at first. He was kind of looking around the cell, I asked him what happened. I didn't get an answer of my first question.
Okay. When you asked that first question, can you describe then what he was doing after you asked him? What was it? What happened, or what was the question?
I don't remember the question. I think it might have been, "Are you hurt?" or something to that nature.
Okay.
It took him, he didn't answer it at first for maybe 10, 15 seconds.
Okay. Do you recall previously indicating that he just sort of stared blankly at the wall?
Yes, he was just kind of staring around, wouldn't make eye contact with me. He didn't acknowledge our presence in the cell at first.
So after sort of this pause that you talked about, did he eventually respond to you?
Yes, he did.
And what did he indicate to you?
I asked him if he was injured, and after a while he looked around, and the first thing he said to me is, "What does that mean?"
When you looked at him, did you notice if he had any injuries on him?
Deputy Zimmerman pointed out and whispered in my ear that he had noticed a slight abrasion on his arm.
Okay. Did it look like a super serious injury?
It did not look serious.
Okay. Nonetheless, did you ask him if he wanted to be attended by medical staff for that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Did he accept any medical attention for that?
No.
Okay. Did you ask him any further questions about what had happened with him?
I asked him if he had fallen off the bed, whether he was up there trying to do something and had fallen, or if he had jumped in an intentional act.
Did he respond right away to you?
Not right away. It was a delayed response. His answer was a little of both.
So you kind of asked him, was it intentional, was it accidental?
Right.
And his response was a little bit of both.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what did you do in response to that?
Well, we weren't able to determine. I did ask him if he was trying to harm or kill himself first.
Okay.
He said no.
Now, when he said that, did he respond right away?
No. All of his responses in this time frame were delayed.
Okay. Now, do you recall also asking in here, again, before you asked him if he wanted to kill himself, if you asked him again whether he had intentions of hurting himself, and him responding, "What do you mean by that?"
I don't recall that.
Okay. After you asked him, you said you asked him if he wanted to kill himself again. You said there was a pause. Did he look directly at you? Was he looking around the cell? What was he doing before he answered?
He never looked directly at me during this entire process, no.
Okay. Do you recall if he was looking around the cell again at that time?
Yes. His eyes were wide open. He never closed his eyes and pretended we weren't there or anything like that. He was conscious and looking around.
Okay. After he answered no to your question about wanting to kill himself, what was the next question that you asked him?
I cannot remember what I asked him next, honestly.
Do you recall asking him why he had jumped from his bunk or his bed?
No.
Okay. Do you recall do you recall that you wrote a report with regard to this incident?
Yes.
Okay. Would looking at that report sort of help refresh your recollection as to sort of the next question that you asked him?
Absolutely.
And, Your Honor, if I may approach?
Yes. You're approaching with his report.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Right, and would counsel then approach for just a minute while he's reviewing his report, please?
Certainly.
members of the jury, while the witness is reviewing his report, let me inform you or instruct you that the court has admitted his testimony only for a limited purpose. You may consider this testimony only as to the issues raised by the defendant's plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. You shall not consider this evidence for any other purpose. Does everyone understand that? And everyone's saying yes and nodding their head yes. Great. All right, you may proceed. Ms. Higgs?
Thank you. Deputy Hubble, have you had a chance to review your report?
Yes, I have.
And does that refresh your recollection as to the next question that you asked Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
And what was that next question?
I asked him why he jumped off of his bunk.
And what did he indicate to you?
He stated to protect you guys.
Did you follow up on that?
Deputy Zimmerman asked him. I did not ask him, but Deputy Zimmerman did. What do you mean by that? Or who do you mean by who he was protecting? And Holmes, I'm sorry, who he was protecting
You.
us from, correct. And Mr. Holmes stated me, indicating that he was protecting us from him.
Now, did this sort of interaction that you had with Mr. Holmes, did this make a whole lot of sense to you at the time?
Not at the time, no.
Okay. Were you concerned that maybe he wasn't well?
Well, we were concerned, even though he stated that he had no intention of killing himself. Actions certainly speak louder than words in those scenarios, so we went ahead and put him on a safety watch and put him in a safety gown and removed any clothing that he could harm himself with.
Okay. So between his actions, between his responses, you still had concerns for his safety, is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So when you decided to move him to a safety cell, that's sort of on the other side of the medical unit, is that right?
Yes, he was stationed in the what's called the infirmary, which is the medical side of things, and then we have the behavior control side, which is on the other side of inpatient. So we moved him to the behavioral control unit.
And when you say the behavioral control unit, that's also for inmates that present a danger to themselves, is that fair?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Where are inmates that present a danger to themselves housed?
There are multiple locations in the jail.
Can they be in the behavioral control unit?
That is one possibility, yes.
Okay, thank you. And is that why did you move Mr. Holmes to the behavioral control unit?
We have 2 safety cells that are located in that area.
Was it out of concern for his safety?
Yes.
Okay. Did you tell him that he had to move over there?
I asked him if he would be able to get up on his own, or if he needed help. He got up on his own. I told him where he was going and what the process was at that point. He complied with every verbal directive I gave him.
Okay. Did he ask you any questions about that?
I don't believe so.
Okay. With regard to his cell, before you moved him across to the safety cell,
Yes.
did you notice any sort of white powdery substance on the floor when you first walked into his cell?
Not when I first walked in, no.
Okay. Now, it was something that somebody had noticed later, is that right?
Yes.
And did you find that kind of odd?
I did find it odd. I noted it in my report. It didn't mean anything to me at the time. However, I figured maybe an investigator or somebody else reading it later down the road might have a connection to it.
So you felt it was important enough to write down, but you had no idea why?
Exactly.
Okay. And did anybody go back on the video to determine how that powdery substance got there? Or what it was?
We went back on the video for a while, but we never saw anything spread during the time that we looked on it, and I can't give you an exact time frame as to how far we went back.
Okay. When you moved Mr. Holmes to the safety cell, did you have him put on a safety gown?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what that is?
It's a green tear-resistant gown. We use it for individuals who may pose a threat to themselves. Instead of giving them their normal clothes, which they can tear underwear or T-shirts and tie it around their neck, this is extremely difficult to tear, and when you're on that type of a safety watch, we monitor you closely, so if you are trying to tear it, we can respond quicker.
Okay. And so then, did you remove his clothing from his cell?
Yes.
And he undressed as pursuant to your direction?
Correct.
Okay, and took that safety gown
Correct.
and put it on?
Yes.
Okay. What was Mr. Holmes' demeanor like during this exchange? Like, what was his voice tone or inflection?
It was very flat.
Okay. Monotone? Is that a good word?
Yes.
Did he sort of instigate or offer up any information to you? So his only responses were really kind of delayed responses to your questions,
Yes.
is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Deputy, I don't have any further questions for you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Cross-examination.
Deputy Hubble, when you dealt with the defendant in his cell that day, he was able to understand your questions.
Yes.
He responded to you. You said he was able to get up on his own.
Yep.
And in fact, the only injury you even saw was a slight abrasion on his arm.
Correct.
And you indicated that when you watched the video, you saw him kind of curl up in the fetal position to protect his head, would you say?
Yes.
And did you also recall seeing on the video him putting his arm out to kind of break his fall?
I don't recall that now. It's been a long time since I've seen the video, so.
Now, you worked in the medical unit for quite a while, didn't you?
During that time period, yes, I did.
And you worked in the medical unit in July of 2012?
Yes.
And you worked in the medical unit after November of 2012 as well?
Yes.
So did you have a lot of contact with the defendant starting in July of 2012?
Yes, I did.
And how would you describe him as an inmate to deal with?
As
Your
an
Honor, I'd object is outside the scope of direct examination.
Overruled.
How would you describe him to deal with?
As an inmate, he is very well behaved. I've never personally had any problems with him. He's always done what I've asked him. So honestly, very model behavior.
And you had contact with him after November of 2012 when he was returned back to the jail?
Yes.
And was his behavior the same as it had been before 2012?
Yes, it was.
During all of the time that you would talk to him, did he commonly respond to you with pretty much one-word answers?
Yes.
So not particularly talkative?
No, no conversations. It was, any conversation we had was if he wanted to come out, he would say yep or nope.
And that's about it, yep and nope. So his conversation on November 11th of 2012 was pretty consistent with how he was before and after in terms of how few words he would talk to you with.
Correct.
Having a delayed response to your questions, that was also something that you found was normal for him prior to November of 2012?
Correct.
And after November of 2012, same thing?
Yes.
So the delay in responding to you even on November 11th, 2012 wasn't really any different than it was any other time that you dealt with him?
The speech pattern I found to be in keeping with what I had known of him. It was only the actions that had been any different.
Thank you. Just one moment, Your Honor. When he fell off the bed and you asked him whether he had jumped or fallen, and he said it was a little bit of both, right?
Correct.
He didn't say anything about shadows chasing him off the bed or that shadows would catch him?
No.
Nothing else that he said other than whether he jumped or fallen, that it was a little bit of both?
Correct.
Thank you.
Is there any redirect, Ms. Higgs?
No, sir, there's not.
All right. And the jury does not appear to have any questions for this witness. May this witness be released from his subpoena, Ms. Higgs?
Yes, sir, he can.
Is there any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Deputy, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, we would call Deputy Bensley? I think I got that right.
Good afternoon. You solemnly swear or affirm on the penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
All right, please be seated. Could you please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names?
Brian Peter Bensley, BryanPeterBenzli.
Ms. Higgs, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Deputy, there is a U in your name, so I always want to say Bensley, but it's Bensley, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Deputy Bensley, probably obvious, but where do you work?
Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office
How long have you worked there?
since September of 2006.
In July and August of 2012, where were you assigned?
I was assigned to the medical unit as a special intervention unit deputy.
Are you still assigned there?
That's correct.
Have you been working there consistently since at least July or August of 2012?
I have.
Okay. What shift do you work?
I work Wednesday to Saturday, 1 to 11.
So
Back
is that...
then, it might have been a little bit different hours, but it was always afternoon shift.
Okay. So 1 p.m. to 11 p.m.
That is correct.
Now, was Mr. Holmes housed in the medical unit back in July, August of 2012?
Yes,
In fact, he's still housed there, correct?
correct.
I want to talk to you about, I guess you could call it an incident that occurred with Mr. Holmes on August 2nd of 2012, okay?
Okay.
Now, I think this was an incident where Mr. Holmes was using his spoon to poke the cover of a wall outlet.
That is correct.
Can you kind of describe what you saw or what you noticed about that?
Yeah, I was advised by the deputy working the cameras that they had seen Mr. Holmes picking at the wall cover. So myself and the other deputy proceeded to go in and speak with him, and he had said he was curious as to what was behind the cover.
Hearsay, Judge.
Any response?
Your Honor, it's not hearsay under 803A, 803-1A. It's not being offered the truth of the matter. It's being offered for its effect on this listener as to how he then proceeded with regard to Mr. Holmes.
Would counsel please approach? The objection is sustained.
Deputy Bensley, after talking, coming into the cell and talking to Mr. Holmes, what action did you then take?
At that particular point, I just documented it, and I warned him that that kind of behavior could result in loss of privileges or items being removed from his cell.
Okay. Now, when we're talking about this outlet cover, I just want to kind of describe this to the jury, if you could.
Okay, real simple. It looks like a wall light switch, but instead of the light switch being in the middle, it's just a solid piece of plastic. Covered up the wall outlets, which we no longer have in the cell. They're actually part of the light fixture currently.
Okay. Does it look like any other outlet cover that you might see in somebody's home, or
It does, just a solid piece of plastic.
nothing out of the ordinary, nothing odd?
No.
Okay. Did you, is this something that you all could see from the video camera?
It was, correct.
Did it appear to you that Mr. Holmes was trying to obscure or hide his behavior in any way?
Not at all.
When you sort of gave him that explanation about, you can't do that, did he seem to understand what you were saying?
There was really no emotion or anything, but we had no further issue.
Okay. And did he ever kind of try to look behind that outlet cover anymore?
No.
Did you take some action later with regard to that outlet cover?
In terms of that, it was never disturbed. It was checked by maintenance and never disturbed, so it remained in place.
So despite him sort of appearing to tamper with it with a spoon, he was unable to actually do anything to it?
That is correct.
Okay. So I want to talk to you and jump forward a little bit into August 4th of 2012. Do you recall an incident, I guess you can call it an incident, with regard to Mr. Holmes on that date?
Yes, involving a water bottle.
Yeah. Yes. Could you explain, if you could you explain what was going on in that?
Yes, again, I was advised by the deputy monitoring the camera. They had seen Mr. Holmes holding up a water bottle, or I guess like a hair gel bottle, up to the light. Advised me and the other deputies. We went in there, spoke with Mr. Holmes. Mr. Holmes advised us.
Object, Your Honor, hearsay.
Sustained.
So when we're talking about the light in the cell, can you describe what type of light this actually is?
It's a fluorescent light. It's mounted on the right side of the wall.
Does it actually give off any heat of any sort?
Very little, if any.
Okay. And when you're talking about the hair gel bottle, what is that made of?
A clear plastic bottle.
Okay. Did you seem to think that this posed any actual real danger within the cell?
From what I saw, no.
Is the cell sort of it's made entirely of concrete, is that fair?
Concrete blocks, correct.
Okay. And there was no heat coming off the light to direct through the plastic bottle, correct?
That is correct.
Now, when you spoke with Mr. Holmes, what type of sort of affect or expression did he have?
He had a very flat effect, showed no emotion.
And after you spoke with him, what did he do?
And after we spoke with him regarding that, once again, we had no further issues. We never saw that type of behavior again.
Okay. And you have worked with Mr. Holmes, I believe, after November of 2012, correct?
That is correct.
And has he always been a good inmate with you?
Yes, he has.
Other than these couple of little incidents, have you personally had any other issues with Mr. Holmes?
No, I have not.
Does he follow your instructions?
Yes, he does.
Does he do what you tell him to do when you tell him to do it?
Yes, he does.
I don't have any further questions for you. Thank you, Deputy Bensley.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Deputy.
Afternoon.
Since you've been in the medical unit with the defendant going back to July 2012,
Okay.
would you say that you have pretty regular contact with him?
I do.
So even before November of 2012, so July to November of 2012, aside from the two incidents that you talked about in August, would you describe him as a good inmate?
Yes.
Does he generally follow the rules?
Yes.
He generally understands when you're conversing with him?
Yes, he does.
Sustained to the form of the question.
Does he generally appear to understand when you're speaking with him as to your requests and your directives?
Yes, he does.
For both this August 2nd, 2012 incident and this August 4th, 2012 incident, once you intervened, did the defendant immediately stop the behavior?
Yes, he did.
No further incidents related to that particular day on the 2nd or the 4th, is that correct?
That is correct.
Fair to say you don't, your job responsibilities is not just the defendant, you have other inmates that you work with over your numerous years going back to even before 2012, correct?
That is correct.
Do inmates frequently push the limits of the rules with yourself as deputies?
Sometimes.
Overruled on all three grounds.
Go ahead, sir.
Sometimes.
What do you mean by that?
It depends. Certain people, depending whether they've been there a long time or it's somebody new. They like to see, they kind of test the deputies, see how far they can get away with something, kind of see if you're paying attention.
In circumstances like that, do inmates sometimes back off once they're confronted by someone like yourself saying, hey, that's not in line with the rules?
They do.
It's fair to say this is not the first time you've seen this type of behavior out of an inmate that you're watching in the jail, is that correct?
That is correct.
Can I have one moment, please?
Yes.
I have nothing further. Thank you, sir.
Is there any redirect?
Deputy Bensley, how many times would you say you've actually seen an inmate holding a vitamin bottle up to a non-heated fluorescent light source?
That's the only time I've seen it in my career.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any recross?
No, sir. Thank you.
And there are no questions from the jury. May this witness be released from his subpoena.
He can be released.
All right, Mr. Edson, any objection?
No objection. Thank you.
All right, Deputy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, we would call Deputy Sean Robison, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I was incorrect. We will call Deputy Hobah.
Good afternoon. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, sir. Please be seated. Tell us your full name for the record, please, and spell your first, middle, and last names.
Thomas Anthony Hobah, Thomasanthony, Hobaughh.
And if you would move the microphone out, please, so that it's facing your mouth. There you go. All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Deputy.
Hello.
Do you work over at the Arapahoe County Jail?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're detecting a theme today. How long have you worked over there?
Since January of 2008.
Okay. What was your general assignment in November of 2012?
I was assigned to the Special Intervention Unit, which was assigned in the medical area, so BC and the infirmary.
Okay. What shift were you working?
I was working day shift with Wednesday through Saturday, so 5 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Was Mr. Holmes an inmate in the medical unit at that time?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to specifically draw your attention to November 14th of 2012. Was Mr. Holmes on the medical unit that day?
No. He was actually on the BC side that day.
Okay.
But in medical unit, yeah, it's just the BC area is what it was called, so.
Right. Had he been moved to the BC side to a safety cell a few days prior?
Correct.
Okay.
On my days off.
So you weren't there when that happened?
Correct.
Okay. Do you recall an incident with regard to Mr. Holmes on that date around, I think it was 12:40 in the afternoon or midday?
Right, yes.
Okay. And what do you recall happening?
I was working with Deputy Hoft, and we were informed by Deputy Nicoletti, who was on the cameras, that he had ran his head into the door of the BC4 cell.
Okay.
We contacted our supervisors and the nurse and went in to evaluate him. The nurse wanted to run an EKG.
Sir, they're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay.
There you go.
It's all right.
Just make sure you speak into the microphone, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay, so just to make sure they got that, you were told by Deputy Nicoletti that Mr. Holmes had run his head into the wall?
Yes.
Okay. You then explain to the jury what you did from there.
We had contacted our supervisors, gotten with the nursing staff, and went in to evaluate him. Upon doing so, the sergeants determined that he needed to be placed in our emergency restraint chair for his safety.
Okay.
And then during his medical evaluation, it was determined he needed to have an IV started.
Okay. When you're talking about an emergency restraint chair, is that something that you may use for the safety, for Mr. Holmes' own safety from himself?
Yes.
Okay. And can you describe what that is?
It's a chair with 6 points on it, so your arms and legs are both strap to the chair, a waist belt, and then 2 shoulder straps, so 7 points.
Did you assist in putting Mr. Holmes into the emergency restraint chair?
Yes.
And did you have an opportunity to, actually, let me approach with D-TR-69.
Okay.
Now, Deputy Hobah, did you have an opportunity to view that video that I just handed you previously?
Just this afternoon.
Okay. And did you initial and sign it?
Yes, ma'am.
Or initial and date it?
Yes.
Okay. When you reviewed that video, did you see yourself on that video?
Yes, ma'am.
And am I correct that you went into that safety cell with some of the other members of the team, both jail staff as well as the nursing staff, to speak with Mr. Holmes or assess Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see yourself on that video?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you see also the video leading up to that where Mr. Holmes had run his head into the wall?
I have not.
Well, did you see it on that
On this,
video?
yes, okay.
Okay. And was that consistent time-wise to the point that you entered into the cell to assess Mr. Holmes?
I'm not sure how long after talking to our supervisors it took to get into the cell.
Fair to say it probably would have only been a few minutes?
Correct.
Okay. And did you see the other people that entered with you after hearing that Mr. Holmes rammed his head on the wall to assess Mr. Holmes?
Yes, they would have been in the room with me, so.
Right. You saw the nurse that came in with you?
Correct.
Okay. And the other deputies, because isn't it protocol to have more than one deputy when you go in?
Yes.
Okay. And you saw them on the video, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then you indicated that you had put Mr. Holmes in an emergency restraint chair, is that right?
Correct.
Is that represented as well there on the video?
Yes, it is.
Okay. After he was in the chair, I think you said something about an IV. Could you explain that a little bit more?
From the medical staff had determined that he had needed an IV, and I'm not sure what it was, but they had us pull his arm out so they could start the IV.
Did you personally go in and assist with that?
I held my flashlight for that, for the nurse to do.
Like held it on his arm so the nurse could see?
Yeah, so more lighting for the nurse to start the IV.
Okay. And did you see that also represented on the video?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move now for admission of D-TR-
69.
Thank you. 69.
Is there any objection?
No objection.
All right, without objection, it is admitted and it may be published.
Your Honor, this video is like 2.5 hours in length, so we're going to actually request to publish it at a later time so we can complete some other witnesses that have been waiting.
Okay.
So I just have a few more follow-up questions with you, sir.
Okay.
Is it also protocol then when somebody's in an emergency restraint chair that they kind of be monitored during that period of time?
Yes.
Now, did you do that, or was that other deputies?
That was other deputies.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I don't have any further questions for you. The prosecution probably does, though.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Deputy Hobah. You were working in the medical unit most of that year of 2012?
Yes.
And were you working there then in July of 2012 when the defendant was first brought to the jail?
I was, but I was on vacation.
Okay, but
yeah.
within a couple of days you were back from vacation and present when he was there?
Yes, ma'am.
How often would you see him on a daily basis?
Your Honor, I'm just going to object to this as outside the scope of direct.
Overruled.
How often did you see him?
Monday or Wednesday through Saturday, whenever we do breakfast, lunch, if the nurse needed to see him or if anybody needed to see him, we would stand by.
So you saw him quite a bit during that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you also working in the jail in the medical unit after November of 2012 and into 2013?
Yes, ma'am.
And continued to see him on the same daily basis at breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Yes, ma'am.
During the times that you saw him, did you ever have any problems with him?
No, ma'am.
Was he polite and cooperative?
Yep.
Appeared to understand always what you were talking about and asking him to do?
Yep.
Followed all your orders?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you see him exercising in his jail cell during that time?
On occasion, yes.
And because you were working in the medical unit, you were aware of whether inmates were getting medication or not. Would that be correct?
I was aware if they were getting medication, but what medication it was, I don't know.
Prior to November of 2012, the defendant wasn't getting any medication, was he?
Not that I recall.
And when he came back after being in the hospital for a few days in November of 2012, he did get some kind of medication, didn't he?
I believe so. Yes.
His behavior prior to going to the hospital and his behavior after coming back from the hospital, was it all the same?
Yes, ma'am.
So he had the same behavior when he wasn't medicated as he did after he was medicated?
Yes, ma'am.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Deputy Hobah, prior to mid-November of 2012, Mr. Holmes was not ramming his head into the wall, was he?
No, ma'am.
Not smearing feces on himself, was he?
No, ma'am.
Was not put in the behavioral control safety cell, correct?
Prior to that, no.
Okay. When he returned from Denver, so basically that behavior during that middle of November time was was different for him, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When he returned from Denver Health, was he taking his medications as he has requested?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And he has always, since that time, taken his medications as he requested?
Yes, ma'am.
And after he was taking his medications, he was no longer ramming his head into the wall, correct?
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't been down there in about a year or so.
Okay. But in those months after November of 2012, was he smearing feces on himself when he was on his medications?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I don't have anything further. Thank you, sir.
Is there any recross?
So just to be clear, from July 20th until, I guess, November 11th or so of 2012, he wasn't taking any medication and he wasn't ramming his head into the wall. Would that be accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
There do not appear to be any questions from the jury. May this witness be released from his subpoena, Ms. Higgs?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any objection, Ms. Pearson?
No, Your Honor.
Deputy, thank you.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
I believe it's Deputy Robison.
Good afternoon. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Please be seated. Could you please tell us your full name for the record, and please spell your first, middle, and last names?
Sean William Robison, SeanWilliamRobison.
Ms. Higgs, you may proceed.
Thank you. Deputy Robison, you work over at the Arapahoe County Jail. Is that right?
I currently work on patrol.
Oh, you do?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, in November of 2012, were you working at the Arapahoe County Jail?
Yes, ma'am.
When did this change occur?
Last July.
Okay. Between November of 2012 and last July, were you working at the jail?
Yes.
Okay. What was your assignment there at the jail, particularly in November of 2012?
I worked in booking usually.
Okay. What hours were you working?
I'm not sure on that day.
Okay.
I worked from the morning till the evening. I worked overtime that day.
Okay. When you work in booking, does it happen sometimes that you get called to other areas of the jail to deal with issues?
Yes.
Okay. Were you called to the medical unit with regard to Mr. Holmes on that day?
Yes.
Now, well, I don't know if we even clarified. We're talking about November 14th of 2012. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you remember about what time it was?
I remember it was the morning, but I do not recall
Okay.
the time.
So kind of midday, 12:40 sound about right?
Yes.
Okay. When you arrived, when you were called to, with regard to Mr. Holmes, what did you do? Where did you go?
I went from booking to behavioral control cell number 4.
Okay. Is that one of the safety cells in the behavioral control unit?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Sir, could you pull the microphone closer to your mouth, please? Thank you. And you can move the microphone too if you like. Thank you.
Now, were you there to help with placing Mr. Holmes into the emergency restraint chair for his safety?
Yes.
Can you sort of describe how his body was when you were trying to help put him into the emergency restraint chair?
He was very tense and rigid.
Okay. Were you able to place him into that chair, you and the other deputies?
Yes.
Was he making any noises? Was he speaking during that period of time?
He was yelling and groaning loudly. He did say several things while we were restraining him.
Did he say things that made sense to you or odd, unintelligible things? Or both?
Hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did you understand what he was saying?
Some of the things, yes.
What about the things that you didn't understand?
Some of them were just unintelligible. Was not able to make them out.
Can you describe any further what Mr. Holmes was like in his presentation during that period?
I do not recall. I think he was wearing a spit mask at the time.
Okay. Were there times where he opened his mouth but noises actually never came out?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you recall speaking with myself and my investigator, John Gonglak, on May 8th of 2014?
Yes.
And do you recall indicating to us that noises came out, but he could not understand what Mr. Holmes was saying?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall saying that when you were putting him in the emergency restraint chair, was nurse Monica Keith, did she come in?
She did.
Okay. And was there a doctor that came in?
I believe the doctor was also there, yes.
How did Mr. Holmes refer to the doctor?
Object, hearsay.
Your Honor, it's basically a present sense impression, state of mind of the declarant. I'm happy to approach.
Yes, why don't you approach, please? right, the objection is overruled. Ms. Higgs?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just give me a moment. I need to get a bit organized, or more organized. Okay. Deputy Robison, during this period of time where you're assisting other deputies to place Mr. Holmes in the emergency restraint chair, do you recall him saying such things as, "Where's father?"
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall him saying, "There's a shadow"?
Yes.
Do you recall him saying, "There's Monica"?
Yes.
Okay. And Monica is a nurse in the jail, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, after he was placed in this emergency restraint chair, did you stay on, or did you leave and go back to booking?
I left and went back to my other post.
All right. Your Honor, I don't have any further questions, I believe, if I can just have a minute. Okay, I don't have any further questions, thank you.
All right, Mr. Edson, do you have any cross-examination?
Can I just have one moment, please?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no cross-examination, thank you.
All right, thank you. And the jury does not appear to have any questions of this witness. May this witness be released from his subpoena?
Yes, is this not working?
I can hear you.
The light keeps going red, just
Oh,
for future.
You might need new batteries. Okay,
He can be released, thank you, Your Honor.
all right. Any objection?
No.
Okay, sir, thank you. Call your next witness, please.
Defense would call Barbara Dubie, please.
Come around this way, please. You solemnly swear or affirm on the penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. All right, please be seated. Please tell us your full name for the record,
Barbara Dubie,
and can you spell your first and last names?
B-A-R-B-A-R-A. Last name is Dubie, D-U-B-E.
Mr. King.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you for being so patient with us. We appreciate it. How are you employed? It may be a little obvious at this point, but what do you do for a living?
A deputy sheriff with Arapahoe County.
And how long have you done that, ma'am?
June 24th, 2008.
And were you thusly employed in November of 2012 as well?
Yes.
What were your assignments at that point in time? Were you assigned to the detention facility?
Yes.
And specifically, was there a specific area or duties that you had?
In medical.
Okay. And you recognize Mr. Holmes seated over here?
Yes, I do.
Has he been located in MC1, the same cell in the medical unit since his incarceration at the detention facility?
Not the whole entire time, no.
Other than when he was removed to go to the state hospital or the hospital or things like that?
Yes.
I'd like to point your attention to specifically November 11th and 12th of 2012. Did something happen on November 11th, beginning on November 11th, with regard to Mr. Holmes that was out of the ordinary?
It's hard for me to remember. I know I did 2 supplemental reports.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at those?
Sure. Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
I'll show this to counsel. Ma'am, I'm going to hand you what I believe are your supplemental report as well as looks like a SIU Daily BC report.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that refresh your recollection, first of all, the supplemental report about something that happened on the 11th of November 2012 at approximately 15:59 hours?
Yes, this one does.
What time is 15:59 hours in,
It's 3:59 in the afternoon.
and what was your shift that you worked in the medical unit?
At that time, it was 2:30 in the afternoon to 12:30 at night.
Is that what would be known as like the swing shift?
Yes, it is.
And can you tell us what happened with Mr. Holmes that you observed or saw on the camera that caught your attention at that
The
time?
only thing I observed on the camera that day at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon was he had rammed his head into the wall approximately 5 feet away, and the nurse was called, and I don't remember if I called for the nurse or not.
Okay. And the nurse was called to clear him medically, is that right?
Yes.
Do you recall that prior to running his head into the wall from 5 feet away that he knelt down as if he was going to start running?
Sorry, yes. That was prior to him hitting the wall.
And what does, like a runner would to start a race or something?
I can't remember exactly. I mean, I haven't seen the video since that night, so what my supplemental says is what happened.
Okay.
I apologize.
There's no need to apologize. This was years ago, is that right?
Yes, 3 years ago.
If you look at the next page, which is 30526 of Discovery, does it indicate that that during the evening he was seen walking around his cell for 3 hours? Do you
I
recall?
noticed for approximately 3 hours that he was just continuously walking around the cell.
In circles, kind of?
Yes.
And at that point, did he do something else which was a little strange with regard to his falling down or something along those lines?
It was approximately 10:48 or 10:49. He fell, and as I saw it on camera, and sometimes the camera, but what I saw was he appeared to brace himself with his butt,
Okay.
and he fell.
And it fell backwards?
Yes.
Okay. And was it at that point in time that he was removed from his cell MC1 and brought to the behavioral control cell and given a suicide gown at that point?
He was already in BC5 at 4 o'clock that afternoon. I don't know when he was placed in BC5, and I don't remember if he had a gown on or not.
Okay.
I can't remember that.
And if you look at the BC note sheet that I gave you, what is that document? Or
This is something that a deputy at the detention facility came up with. It's been many years. And we were supposed to fill these out on a nightly basis.
Okay.
I don't even remember what these were ultimately for.
Okay.
Whether it was just to monitor their behavior. It's been a very long time since I've seen this document, and we don't use these documents anymore.
Okay. It was a form that you filled out, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And do you see there on the 11th your notation of him running into the wall?
Tempted to hit it. Yes, I do.
And is there a notation for the following day, the 12th of November, 2012?
No. It's just the 11th. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No reason to apologize. What does your note from the 12th reflect that you observed Mr. Holmes doing?
Objection, hearsay.
I don't think the question is calling for hearsay. You can't talk about what was said outside the courtroom. Are you asking for a statement?
No, just what she observed and wrote down.
Okay. The objection is overruled.
Well, I cannot read my own handwriting. I apologize. I can read behavior and around.
Does it look like odd behavior rolling around on floor?
No, because there's no on. This could be rolling around. I can see behavior, but there's no rolling. I can't read this.
Okay.
I
May I
apologize.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may approach.
You said you don't, I better wait till I get to the... You said that you don't, no longer keep this form, is that right?
Not that I'm aware of, but I am in a totally separate unit of the jail now.
Okay.
So anything that happens in medical, I'm unaware of.
At the time that you did keep this, at the time that you did keep this, is this something that you kept on a regular basis and documented the observations that you observed in?
We were supposed to, yes.
Is that something that was done in the normal course of conducting your daily business in the detention facility down in that medical unit?
For down there, yes, it was down there. Whether it was done consistently by other deputies, I do not know.
Is this something that you filled out yourself and other deputies filled out that had actual knowledge of the things that you were observing when you wrote them down?
Yes.
And was this preserved by the jail in order to have an accurate copy of an indication of what was going on in the jail at that time?
I don't know, because once the logs were done and taken out, I don't know where they went.
Okay. Do you, and you have no independent recollection of this event that you wrote down on the 12th?
No, I don't.
Excuse me. With regard to what happened on the 11th, where Mr. Holmes, you noted in your supplemental report, hit his head on the wall and then fell down, do you know, did you order if any video be collected of that incident that happened on the 11th?
I did not pull any of the video because we couldn't leave the medical unit. As far as I can remember, it would have either been the booking, somebody in booking, or sergeant.
Okay.
I don't remember.
And you haven't reviewed any videotape of that incident on the 11th, is that right?
Not since that evening, no.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you, Deputy. I don't have any other questions, Your Honor.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any cross-examination?
Good afternoon, Deputy. All right, sorry about that. Deputy, would you say that in your experience as a deputy, have you seen inmates do the types of things that you saw the defendant do on November 11th?
Yes.
Is it fair to say in your career as a sheriff deputy that you've seen inmates engage in all sorts of behaviors on a regular basis to manipulate their environments?
Yes.
Objection, relevance, Your Honor.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, what was your answer for the jury?
Yes.
Okay. And this was not the first time you'd seen behavior like this from an inmate?
No.
In fact, have you seen much worse behavior from inmates?
Yes, I have.
Now, during your assignment in the jail, it's true that you had an opportunity to observe the defendant from at least November of 2012 through October of 2013.
Yes.
Okay, and you kept observation log sheets throughout that time of your observations of the defendant.
Yes.
And you had the opportunity to meet with me and review those observation log sheets.
Yes, I did.
Would you tell the jury about the extent of your observations of the defendant over that year?
It was seeing him on camera sleeping or walking around the cell for exercise is what I assume. Jogging around his cell. We would serve him dinner. We have to ask every inmate in the medical unit if they want tea or juice, and his response was always no. And that's as far as my engagement with him.
And the defendant complied with your commands?
Yes, all the time.
And his behavior was consistent with that of other inmates?
Yes.
During November 25th of 2012? During December of 2012? Would you say it was consistent with other inmates?
Yes.
Objection, outside the scope.
Overruled.
Would you say it was also consistent during February, August, and October of 2013?
Yes.
And you had an opportunity to see the defendant exercise regularly in his cell?
Yes.
Can I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. King, do you have any redirect?
Just one question, two questions, actually. Deputy, you're not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a mental health professional, are you?
No.
So what you observed Mr. Holmes doing certain behaviors, you're not aware why he was doing those behaviors or for what purpose, are you?
No.
Thank you. I don't have anything further.
Do you have any recross?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
And the jury does not appear to have any questions for this witness. May this witness be released from her subpoena?
Yes, sir.
Any objection?
No objection.
Deputy, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. King, do you want to call a 5 or 10 minute witness, or should we adjourn?
Your Honor, we have a 2-minute exhibit we could play for the jury, but I'm happy to break now and play the 2-minute exhibit some other time.
You can play it now. What exhibit number is it?
DTR 16. DTR 68, Your Honor.
And it's one that was admitted last week, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you want me to dim the lights?
Sure, it's a little, just a little over 2 minutes, I think.
Okay. Okay, the record should reflect that we just finished publishing D-TR-68. All right, members of the jury, it's about 5 o'clock, so let's go ahead and take our break for the day. Please make sure that you follow all the admonishments that I have been giving you throughout the trial overnight, and then let's plan on having you back at the usual time tomorrow morning. All right, get some rest tonight. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that we are now outside the presence of the jury. Just briefly, before we adjourn for the day, I've been giving the limiting instruction with at either party's request, and every time I've given it, there has been no objection. I keep reminding the parties because I don't want the jury to be confused, and it seems like the parties sometimes ask for it and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's one party, sometimes it's the other party, sometimes it's neither party. It seems to me like all of the testimony, or most of it today, with the exception of perhaps one witness who testified just in terms of laying the foundation for the videotape that was taken right after the interrogation. All the other evidence seems to me is evidence that should be subject to the limiting instruction. It's evidence that, at least it seems to me, has been introduced for the issues raised by the not guilty by reason of insanity plea. I'm only bringing this up because, again, I don't want the jury to be confused in terms of, I wonder why that's not subject to the limiting instruction, but this other testimony or evidence is. So I don't know whether the parties have any position with respect to that, but I thought I should bring it up. Anything from the people on that point or on any other point?
Your Honor, I don't have anything on that point, but I have something on another point, if I may.
Okay, before we move on, let's see if there's anything from the defense on that point.
Your Honor, if we could address this tomorrow morning, if we have anything further to add.
Okay. All right, think about it overnight. I'm throwing it out there because, again, it seems to me there's no real reason why I've given it with respect to some witnesses today, but not with respect to the last one or two witnesses. And I've been asking the parties about it, and it seems like when I ask the parties, then at least one party wants it. But the last time I asked, Mr. Edson said he wasn't asking for it, and Ms. Higgs said she wasn't asking for it. So, all right. Ms. Stitch-McGuire, what other issue do you have?
First, Your Honor, Mr. Rockler asked me to see if there's any way we could talk to the defense, and I didn't have an opportunity to ask them this, so maybe I can just ask them afterwards. But if there's any way they can tell us what days their experts might be testifying this week so that we could coordinate with our experts to be able to watch that testimony.
Mr. King?
Judge, we've provided our list of witnesses for this week pursuant to the request of the agreement that we have with the people. I asked Mr. Brockler 3 times if he would let us know when he was calling his expert witnesses, and he refused to do so. So, in all fairness, I don't think that we're required to do so, and I don't think that we should. We had to guess when they were going to call their witnesses over a month worth of testimony, and they have a week to guess. So,
okay, thank you. What's your next point?
Thanks, Your Honor. And just for the record's clear, Your Honor, we did notify them when Dr. Reed and Dr. Metzner were going to testify. That's okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, what's the next point?
The next point, Your Honor, is that I anticipate that the defense, based on the list that they were kind enough to give us, that Tara Cucci, C-U-C-C-I, her maiden name was Fournier, F-O-R-N-I-E-R, may testify for the defense. It appears that she was a recruiter and trainer for Marical, which we heard from 2 other Marical witnesses today, Jose Sanchez Lopez, or Jose Sanchez, and David Maldonado. I would object to the testimony of Ms. Fournier under 401, 403, and I'd also like to object to a specific statement that I don't know if the defense just disclosed this to us or if they have any intention of actually bringing up this evidence in court, but this person was basically an HR employee for Marical, and in the interview that the defense gave to us, she states that she thought that the defendant perhaps would be autistic because she had 2 autistic children and saw signs of autism in the defendant. The people would be objecting to the defense eliciting any of this testimony as she is not qualified to give any sort of opinion that could be found in the DSM, as she is not a psychologist nor a psychiatrist. So I would ask for a motion in limine to exclude that evidence. Additionally, Your Honor, I feel like this testimony is cumulative of that of Jose Sanchez and of David Maldonado's. Perhaps she did have two circumstances where that may have been a different type of interaction with the defendant, and that was both probably his initial interview with the company as the HR director, and then apparently there was some sort of, she called it a racial incident that she interviewed the defendant about. But other than that, I think that we heard plenty from Jose Sanchez and David Maldonado on that the testimony would be cumulative.
All right, who wants to respond?
Your Honor, we do intend to call Ms. Fournier. We do intend to ask her her observations of Mr. Holmes while he worked at Marical. It's the last witness from Marical we intend to introduce. I don't think 3 witnesses to describe his behavior during that time is cumulative. So we do intend to present that testimony.
I agree that it's not cumulative. There may be some overlap, but I don't think this would qualify as the unnecessary presentation of cumulative evidence. It seems like now the shoe's on the other side, and so now the prosecution is objecting on cumulative grounds. The defense is saying, no, this is not cumulative. So just as the earlier discussion we had related to the expert witness who was not endorsed, and the parties were then in opposite positions than they were before when there was a discovery issue with respect to the 24-hour fitness witness. In terms of the particular statement, it seems to me, Ms. Brady, that your witness can testify about her observations. It seems to me it would be inappropriate for her to testify that, in her opinion, the defendant was autistic, or that he was exhibiting any symptoms that are consistent with autism, because these are symptoms that she has observed in her children. She can talk about her observations, specific observations, for example, and I have no idea what the observations are, but flat affect and quiet, reserved, things like that. She can talk about those observations. I'm not sure whether you're intending to have her say that she thought he was autistic, but that would be, in my view, improper.
Can I, given the court's statement, can I ask her if it seemed like more than just someone who was shy, that she was concerned that something might be wrong with him?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I don't think there's any problem with that.
I'll do that, given the court's order.
Okay. All right, is there anything else?
Nothing from the people, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, anything from the defense?
No, Your Honor, not at this time.
Okay, great, thank you. Have a good evening. I'll see you tomorrow morning. The court will be in recess.